are not typically graded. And this new thing, it's not what I am saying. If you, I mean, I just put some research as a word in dictionary, and as you could see, all the dictionaries of Oxford, Collins, Cambridge, Britannica, the encyclopedia, everybody reports. As you could see, I have highlighted that the new word is clearly there. So the idea of research is to find something new. I mean, that is something which we all must understand. Because without, suppose we understanding that, I know scores and scores of researchers in our country are involved in research. But then if we want to have the impact, the basic minimum understanding of the research is, I am going to find, or in the attempt of, I might succeed or may not succeed, that is different, but at least I am in the attempt of finding something new. That is something which is very important to understand research. Of course, it is not the only condition to qualify to be a research. Of course, my method of research is also important. I can accidentally find something. Like, for example, Alexander Fleming accidentally discovered penicillin, but that would not become a research until and unless the whole mechanism is explained. I mean, then only actually it becomes research. I mean, it was quite convenient for Alexander Fleming to discover that and finally convert into a research because he was in that field. I mean, somebody else might accidentally find something else, but then to call it a research, we have to follow something which is called scientific method. I mean, today probably we don't have the time to go through what is scientific method, etc. But I think all of us in this audience might know that, we have to have the conditions of precision, replicability, the condition of falsifiability and parsimony to be satisfied, to be the basic principle of scientific method we need to satisfy. And that's where, we have to consider things in tentative way and where the things can change. And that is how actually the knowledge progresses. I mean, nothing is absolute. I mean, that is precisely the difference science has with respect to religion. I mean, that, nothing is absolute, no absolute book, no absolute authority, no absolute person, no absolute theory. It is actually everything can be challenged and everything can be questioned. And with new observations, things can change for better knowledge. So that is what, science differentiates itself from other methods of knowing, right? And so that is, so when we are undertaking a research, of course, we need to follow scientific method, but we also have to find something new. But if you are not finding new, we follow, so for example, we are doing a lot of, following a lot of scientific method, but we might not in the attempt of finding new. I mean, where does it happen? It happens, for example, in our laboratories. I mean, when we are student in our science lab, we are actually following a scientific method, but we are not in that attempt of finding new. We are just verifying something, and we are basically trying to, for our own knowledge, we are trying to experiment something which the result is expected and it has been already experimented. We are just repeating it. So we are not attempting to find something new, as such new for the society. That might be new for us, for our understanding, but that is not new for the society. So when you're talking about research, it is new for the society. You must add to the domain knowledge. That means you must, you must have that with the attempt that you can actually have it for the new thing must be added to the societal knowledge. So that is the attempt. So that is the basic understanding of research. One thing, Dr. Neha, one thing I just would like to propose that it just struck me because I am also carrying my mobile. Should I, go to Microsoft Team in the mobile and and basically try whether I can be visible there and then can put the mic off. And
Yes, sir. You can join
yeah, so I will
from
just
the
try, but this
phone
should
and
not
laptop
echo.
also.
It should not echo. That is the only thing I must also make sure.
Uh, One thing you can do, sir, you can place your mobile.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, and
Yes, sir.
also I'm
Yes, you
visible.
are audible and visible. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I'm basically using the audio video of my mobile, and then I'm using the laptop for the screen. Okay. So is this fine? Can I continue?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
So is it not, it's not echoing, it's no disturbance from your side, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So the point I was making was that if we, so if you just read this, what research is, I mean, research is defined as a creation of a new knowledge and the use of existing knowledge in a creative way so as to generate new concept, methodologies, and understandings. I mean, this include the synthesis and the analysis of the previous research to the extent that the new outcome is found. Even if you are, I mean, that is what I will come to also. Even if you are doing, for example, a lit review, okay, if you are just summarizing the literature, it is not research. I mean, this is not even literature review. Summarization of literature is not literature review. It is, when you are doing a literature review, you have to do it to find or organize or apply our mind to find something more which is known about that literature. So that is something which also I will come to in a moment. But the idea is, research is all about this never ending conversation by helping us, that the researcher community, to, for the society basically, to free all of us, to the, the general public, from ignorance, prejudices, and half baked ideas that so many charlatans try to impose on us. So this is something which we all must have a, in that sense, as researcher we have that responsibility. I mean, if we all recollect in our study days, we could garner knowledge from different textbooks, because the textbooks are outcome of research. Finally, people's painstaking research has actually finally come to the textbook from which we have got our knowledge. So our responsibility in research therefore is to extend that knowledge, and when we are extending that knowledge, we must be extremely careful about to be honest and to follow the scientific method, and also to have the desire to find something new. So these things must come together to undertake a research. So that is my limited point of what we understand by research. And then to have a, I mean, this talk is more about having the impact. So I think one of the ways we can generate more impact, that is what from my personal experience as well as what I have traveled. So which we have to take a path which is less traveled. So for example, if you when Dr. Prem about sufficiency, or for example, I accepted the invitation to sort of co-edit that special issue on sufficiency. The idea was that we sufficiency is something which has not given the due attention it deserves. It is one of the neglected areas in the pursuit of knowledge. So that is something we need to, if you want to create impact. So one of the things I was mentioning about a lot of choices with us. So one of the choice, when you make the choices, let us not crowd the space which has already been crowded. Okay, so let us actually choose a path which has not been taken by many. So that is something which will actually lead to better impact. I mean, I would say, otherwise what our impact would be marginal or slightly, what can say, incremental. It would not be, what they call as a path breaking research, or a substantial research is something which actually comes out when we take an unpopular area of work and we ask an unpopular question. I mean, if you see, I will give an example here. See, all of us might know about something which is called the Millennium Development Goal, right? In the Millennium Development Goals, as you know, these goals were formulated in the year 2000, and that is the reason it is called Millennium Development Goals. And the goals were set for the year 2015. Now, when it was around in the first decade of this century, that is around 2005, 6, 7, 8, those are the time what we can say as a midterm of the the goal, the target year. So that is 2000, the targets were framed, 2015 targets were supposed to be achieved. So 2000, around 7, 8 was the time. There were a lot of mid time review was happening in terms of achievements in Millennium Development Goals, and it was found that most of the goals, most of the indicators, that is the African region is something which is bound to fail in almost all the Millennium Development Goals in a substantial way. So it has been across the spectrum. I mean, it is by the international organization, by the national organizations, by the researchers, by the policymakers. It was agreed and it was acknowledged that it is Africa which is bound to fail in the Millennium Development Goal substantially. Now, everybody was asking that question, why Africa is failing? I mean, something which doesn't work in Africa, which work rest of the world, but it doesn't work in Africa, right? So, but then there was one researcher, Easterly, who wanted to ask a very different question looking at this phenomenon. The question he asked was, what is the problem in the Millennium Development Goals, or how the Millennium Development Goals are designed in such a way that it is actually failing? So this is something which actually led to a very path-breaking paper where he went the goal by goal. He analyzed the main indicators of each goal and tried to showcase that if the goals would have been designed in a slightly different way, then it would have actually resulted into a African success. So Africa has actually progressed a lot, but the way the Millennium Development Goals are designed, it is actually designed to be disadvantageous to a particular society which is starting at a very low base. Like, for example, it was talking about making the poverty to half. Now, obviously, a society which is starting from 80% poverty to make it 40% poverty, that means 40% of the population have to be taken out of poverty. Compare that to another society which has maybe 20% poverty or 10% poverty. For them, it is only 10% or 5% population have to be taken out of poverty. So even if in Africa, 30% population were taken out of poverty, but since it is starting with 80% poverty, it is showing as a failure in that goal because the way the goal is designed. So we would find that if you go goal by goal, you will find if that the goal would have been designed in a slightly different way, then Africa would have shown much better success, in fact, compared to many developing economies. But so that is what is the point. Africa not doing good in the MDGs. The questions could have been asked as a researcher in many different ways. Many people at that point in time were asking the questions that what is wrong with Africa? But there is one researcher who asked a very different question, that what is wrong with Millennium Development Goals? So that is the difference. I mean, when we actually ask a research question which is, maybe slightly unpopular or slightly uncharted, is something which you are going to create a large impact. And that's how Easterly's 2008 paper is considered to be one of the pioneering work in measurement literature, because the way he actually asked a very different question. Am I going well? I mean, is it audible? Because I am getting the resound. So I'm doubting whether you are getting the resound or not. Are you getting the resound, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you are getting also resound, or it is fine?
Yes, sir. Some echo are coming.
Okay, that's what. So Salvi, then I will switch off my camera then.
Yeah, sir. No problem.
Yeah. So I hope I mean, till now it is fine. I mean, what we have discussed. Yeah. So was it? Is my screen visible, Pam?
No,
Is it
not yet, sir.
not yet? One second. Sorry for this many problems.
No, sir, it's okay.
Yeah, is it visible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I will go. I mean, let's go without the echo because that is creating maybe more nuisance. Yeah. So if we see, so the one idea what I wanted to express before was that the idea that, the path which is less traveled is something which we need to consider. And the next idea is that we need to have that, sharp observation. I mean, I will give few examples. How do you create impactful research by doing that? And the inquisitive mind. I mean, going beyond the most obvious is something which is very important. Here, I've already given the example of, the penicillin discovery, which is actually, of course, fact being Alexander Fleming was a scientist and he could discover that. He was very disorderly. Some of you might know the story of, I mean, you must be knowing the story of penicillin discovery, where this, after when he comes back from the lab, he finds that the things are not as it was supposed to be. And then basically where all the, the things have spread, he basically found that the virus has not spread. And that's how he sort of found that there is something which actually can be something which can prevent the virus spreading. So that is how, so this, I mean, it is, if somebody else would have been in that position with neither the skill or nor the inquisitiveness, would have probably not spotted it. So that is one thing which, I mean, all of us understand in any kinds of research, be it in natural science, social science, we do encounter situation, but it is almost like any creative pursuit, we actually face the same situation. I mean, even the poets and the writers actually come across things which ordinary mortals, fail to perceive. So this is something as a researcher which is very important, that we need to have that inquisitiveness in the mind, because problems are indeed, there are a lot of problems around us, but then we need to pick that problem and have that inquisitiveness. We must not allow, for example, a thing to go on. I mean, be it about, that is actually, I mean, I believe all of us who have joined here are social scientists or management professionals or management scientists. I mean, this is also, we might see that many of the social problem, if you see, we are, first of all, reluctant to identify them as a problem and attack them. And that is the reason the problems are aplenty and existing. If you see in the, like, for example, COVID happened, you ask a natural scientist, the virologists, or the people who are professionals to address that problem, they went to their lab and tried to find a vaccine and try to come out with a solution for that problem. But the same kind of spirit we don't see in management or social scientists. When you say, for example, there is corruption, there is other kinds of social issues. I mean, there is casteism, there is other kinds of, social inequalities we do face in our society. I mean, where the scientists need to, there are, like, for example, every other day, the leaders of our, the representatives are bought and sold. I mean, the political parties are able to, or the governments are broken every day by horse trading. I mean, this is something which is happening. I mean, we have a lot of political scientists, there are a lot of political science departments, but as we can see, there is not enough, from the scientists, there is not enough. I first of all identify this as a problem, and also asking those unpopular questions, and then trying for that solution. So that is the other point which I would like to mention. The third point is that, we need to go beyond the obvious. I mean, what is, what has been already told to us is something which may be wrong. I mean, that is the one idea which we might have. And that is one study I want to highlight here, which I actually witnessed at IIM Ahmedabad as a doctoral student in a doctoral colloquium, is, Girija Saran's work on passive condensation. I mean, as some of you might know that Girija Saran he was somebody who actually did this exercise, in terms of he was actually in a study in Rajasthan, and where he found that the where he was staying, the sand around his staying compound has become wet in the morning. And when he asked the security guard or the caretaker, they say basically this is wet, obviously because of the overnight dew. But then, as a civil engineer, or as somebody who has actually had some knowledge of civil engineering and otherwise also, he had actually had the impression that the dew water is minimal and it cannot be harvested for generation of drinking water. But then he wanted to defy that obvious thing which was told to him as a student. So when he was told that dew water could not be harvested, this is something which actually he wanted to experiment and find that whether indeed, particularly in places like Rajasthan, where there is a lot of scarcity of water, whether the water can be harvested enough, for solving some of the crises. And that's exactly what he did. And he actually went beyond that obvious knowledge that dew water cannot be harvested, which is conventionally understood, and went for experimenting different surfaces, and then basically finding that, once he got some support. Initially, of course, Government of India didn't support, or the Department of Science and Technology didn't support. And he got a foreign support of a very small grant, and he experimented with certain surfaces and finally come out with, one particular surface which produces this dew water in large quantity, in the sense, in sufficient quantity. Among the different, different material, he was basically testing what is this passive condensation without any use of external energy like electricity. Condensation does happen in our freezer every day, but then we are using electricity for that. But without using any external electricity, whether naturally in a passive way can we have water from the dew? And that is something which he experimented. And finally he has, you can check its YouTube, some documents are there in the YouTube where he has done that in several Rajasthan schools, and as well as even dry area of Gujarat schools, where earlier children used to bring water from home to school, but after this implementation, he basically that the kind of situation was there, the children used to take water from school to home. That is again, if you ask me the impact of the research, this impact of the research is phenomenal. And this impact, if you see, has come out from a small observation, which everybody observes, wet sand, slightly wet sand in the morning, if you are in a colder region or drier region for that matter. But then in the winter, you will probably see that. But then, somebody thought that this is something which is good enough for extremely water stressed or water scarce region for drinking water. This particular, that going beyond the most obvious is extremely important for having an impactful research. And suppose one asks us that whether we need to orient our research for the the dominant paradigm or the larger purpose. That is, I would actually say yes. I would say yes, because thereby actually you become more visible among the stakeholders. You make more noise, and also there is a likelihood of you getting more support. I will talk about two examples here. Some of you definitely know that about the same language subtitling, which was Ashoka Fellow Brij Kothari's work. And if you talk about same language subtitling, this is actually the, when we observe that, what do you want, sir? Camera is not working, so you can do whatever. So if you say the same language subtitling is something which is, we witness that when we go for TV programs, many times we see in certain programs, as the dialogue is being delivered, there is a subtitle of the dialogue that comes in the same language. When there is, for example, a program is run in Hindi, you will find the subtitles in the Hindi language. and several local language also. Suppose a program is going in Punjabi or Bengali, there is a subtitle will be coming in Punjabi or Bengali. So this is something which is done. I mean, like it started with the Rangoli program, popular TV program, and that has now happened in many. If we go to the DD channel or many other channels, we will find such subtitles come. And this is basically the idea from Brij Kothari. Brij Kothari, as a student, as a research student, he was actually, in somewhere in the West when he was a PhD scholar. He was once watching a Spanish movie, and then when that subtitle that was available for that movie was in English subtitle, so he was, the reason for which he was watching that movie was he wanted to learn Spanish. So what he felt was that, Spanish and English probably share the same script, that is the Roman script. So what he felt that instead of English subtitle, had this been Spanish subtitle, then I would have learned this language better. So this is something, the idea what struck him, that actually a same language subtitling, I could able to learn the language better. He got that idea when he was back in India. He got that idea to actually not for learning a foreign language, what was his initial purpose when he came across this idea, but he actually used that idea to basically increase the reading ability of the students, particularly those who are in the informal settlements or in the rural areas, where you typically find a seventh standard student is finding difficulty in reading, for example, a fifth standard book. So this same language subtitling is something which, can make children quickly, read the language as they are basically watching a program. They are interesting program, and thereby their reading ability would actually improve. And that is what he experimented in a pilot basis initially in certain settlements in Gujarat to start with, and then subsequently he collaborated with Delhi Doordarshan, and Delhi Doordarshan telecast it in an randomized control kind of experiment, where they basically did this subtitling in certain areas where rest of the areas were not given the subtitle, and it was observed for a year or so, and it was found that the areas in which the subtitles were given, there is a remarkable improvement in the reading ability of the students compared to the control group. And thereafter, this entire thing was done across the country. And this has actually resulted in an impact which is phenomenal. I mean, government, even today, also in those days, were spending huge money in terms of improving the reading abilities of the students. And this particular idea and going, orienting this idea, the idea came, as I said, it was for learning a foreign language, but for the larger purpose of the society, was the reading inabilities of the children who are in, remote locations or not sort of got the opportunity of availing the best of the education. For them, the reading ability can be improved. That's something the larger purpose was there, and therefore he basically applied it to the larger purpose, got the support from the right quarters, and finally, same language subtitling. You can see a lot of material on that in the internet on same language subtitling, which has actually gone international. The SLS as an organization has spread to many countries and has propagated this idea with a very minimal cost. It has created a phenomenal change. So when we actually undertake, any kind of idea, I mean, the other example in this context I want to give about was Odisha Millet Mission, which has been recently renamed as Sri Anna Abhiyan. I think this is quite a mismatch a name. I mean, the previous name was far better, because Anna in the, this part of the country mostly, means rice, whereas the Millet Mission was about millets. So, but leaving aside that point, the Odisha Millet Mission, if you see, had multiple objectives in mind. If we look at, it is basically come out in 2016-17, and it was a collaborative effort of academia, civil society and the government all coming together from the day zero. I mean, it is one of the unique mission where the academia or the research part was visible from the very first point. I mean, generally researcher comes in the end for an evaluation. I mean, some of you who are in this meeting as well also. Otherwise, we gave a lot of task of evaluating government schemes. I mean, we come at the end. Civil society similarly will come towards the implementation. But here, Odisha Millet Mission was a unique program. Some of you might know that is something which where all the stakeholders came from the beginning. But the point which I want to highlight from a research point of view or from advocating a research point of view to get the support, Odisha, though millets have a lot of advantages in terms of being a very climate resistant crop, I mean weather resistant crop, suiting to the tribal areas or the hilly lands, it actually would stop a lot of migration. It actually requires very less water. I mean, doesn't require a lot of chemical fertilizer. So it has actually all these advantages. But when Odisha Millet Mission was actually pitched, it is not pitched in any of these advantages per se. Though these were advantages, people recognized it as the side advantage. But the main purpose of which the Odisha Millet Mission was pitched and subsequently expanded to all the districts of Odisha and several hundred blocks is because of the idea that the millets are going to address the malnutrition of the state. I mean, Odisha was suffering. I mean, whether it is about children malnutrition, women malnutrition in various areas, and millets as a crop having a lot of micronutrients is going to address the malnutrition problem, though it has other advantages relating to climate, environment, water, etc., and migration. I mean, stopping migration, but it was peace. So this is something which is, as researcher, if we want to have the impact, we would like to, we would have to keep it in mind that whether without losing out the purpose, am I able to orient or reorient my research question so that it actually align with the larger paradigm or the larger interest of the society. So this is something which we must keep it in mind. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we always go with the dominant paradigm. I mean, research also are to questioning the dominant paradigm also. So this is somewhere I generally say, and we generally tell to our students, I mean, one of the things a researcher, one of the attribute a researcher must have in mind about this fearlessness, in the sense that, if I'm going to question somebody who has a greater authority, in the field, that is completely acceptable in research. And that's what exactly, when we talk about the falsifiability condition in scientific method, that we assume it to be true till it is proved to be false. So this is something which is I mean, if a better theory comes, then obviously the better theory superimposes on the earlier theories. So the idea that all scientists basically have this unsaid agreement among themselves that they agree to this condition of falsifiability, that means they are accepting. So one stage, I mean, all of them are actually, one way where it is showing about both honesty as well as humility. And so this is the same. I mean, as young researchers, I know many times we have seen that people are afraid to question about what they study in the textbook or what is they've been told in the class. This is something which, as a researcher, one has to take into consideration that mistakes can be committed by even the stalwarts of the area. And that, the idea that, one must have that, even the established theories can be questioned, and that actually can lead to a radical impact if we are able to prove that is something which might be wrongly understood by the existing notions. One example I would like to give here in the context of what we know about Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory, and some of us might know, prospect theory basically came as a counter to the expected utility theory. And if we see, I will just show one sort of graph here, and while also asking a question. So the expected utility theory, if you see the graph which is there on your screen on the left, is that when something's probability increases from 0 to 1, the decision weight or the value to that particular phenomenon actually increases from 0 to 1. I mean, that was the kind of a linear relationship which the expected utility theory assumed. But then what Kahneman and Tversky sort of, through a lot of experiments on people's behavior, they could actually conclude that, when we generally find that people go for buying lottery, so even if they know the chances of getting chances of winning the lottery is extremely low. I mean, it is like 1 in a million, for example, but still they go for buying those lotteries. So which goes on to say that when the probability becomes 0 to something finite, okay, then actually the decision weight, what we give to the probability, or the valuation what we give, actually increases sharply. So therefore it doesn't, in the 45-degree line is not actually the correct line. Actually, the slope becomes very high at the origin. I mean, when we move out of the origin, just out of the origin, the slope is actually, it rises sharply. And then also, I mean, it has been experimentally, shown quite well that when we are given the option, like for example, if for example, somebody will ask us that whether you will go for an option where you have a 90% chance of winning 100 rupees versus 100% chance of winning 90 rupees. Okay, so which option we would take? Most of us will definitely take, anybody wants to tell this, which option wants to take? So if there are two options of, 90% chance, first option is option A is 90% chance of winning 100 rupees. And second option is 100% chance. I mean, you're definitely going to win 90 rupees. So which option you would take?
Second, sir.
Second option. So that is exactly the point. So that when, ma'am, you can, camera is not working. So so a second one, that's correct. So that is exactly the point, that when it is certainty, again the valuation what we give actually rises sharply. And that is what actually in this graph, as you could see, when the probability is becoming 1, then the decision weight is actually, the slope is becoming higher. So that is what is the contribution to the prospect theory, part of the contribution of the prospect theory. Of course, prospect theory also talks about the gains and the losses. I think some of us might know about it. I mean, when people ask us that the happiness what you get of finding a 100 rupees note on the road, and which you, I mean, the law of the land is if you find unattended any money, you can pocket it. Suppose that is the law of the land, and you found 100 rupees on the road, and the happiness you will get of having that 100 rupees note, and the sadness you might have of losing a 100 rupees note. So if you compare these two situations, which would be more? Anybody, please? The happiness sadness will be more. Yeah. So that is exactly the prospect theory found. I mean, whereas in the expected utility theory, it is actually a 45-degree line going across the first and the third quadrant. But that is actually is not the case. I mean, so this is, the established theories are always right is something which many researchers, particularly, I have seen, whatever, interaction which we have, the one thing which we basically ask, everybody to basically question what has been already done. And one, kind of personal experience I have on this is, about a paper which was written by Professor Sudhir Anand and Professor Amartya Sen in 1995. And it was about, how the UNDP's gender development measures should be formulated. And that was a very well thought out paper, which also, came as a, background paper, UNDP background papers, as well as it was a part of the readings in human development published by Oxford University Press. But if you see the way I'll just give you the way Professor Anand and Professor Sen sort of, designed that measure of gender development. So what they did was, they did something called, because this was like gender inequality adjusted development. So what does it mean? It means that if there is a difference between the achievements of the two genders, then instead of taking a normal average, that is arithmetic mean, weighted arithmetic mean, they will go for a harmonic mean. So if we just recollect our school days mathematics, we used to use harmonic mean in a problem context. If you remember, like somebody would say that you go to your home to office, and there was hardly any traffic, and therefore you could drive or cycle in 60 whatever, drive maybe 60 kilometer per hour, right? And then, but while coming back from office to home, it was evening traffic, and therefore you could drive only in 40 kilometers per hour. So generally in school days, we used to be asked in exams and otherwise that what is the average speed of my to and fro journey. Anybody who remembers and who can make a guess or attempt this? So if you go to a place A to place B in 60 kilometer per hour, but if you go from place B to place A, or you return in 40 kilometer per hour, so what would be the average speed of the entire journey? No, 50 would be the arithmetic mean, sir. So it would be harmonic mean, because you have to, distance is the same, you have to compute time t1 and time t2, and then basically the total distance divided by the total time. And if you do that, what you finally find, some of us might have already got it, what you basically get is the harmonic mean, which is basically 2ab by a plus b, right? And that is the answer. Would be anybody? If it like you go by 60 and come by 40 kilometer per hour, then what would be the average speed? Anybody else? Yeah, so it would be 48. So it would be 48 kilometer per hour, which is basically a harmonic mean, which is not an arithmetic mean, which is harmonic mean. So harmonic mean will be same as the arithmetic mean when the two numbers are equal. Quite obvious, right? When the numbers are different, the more the difference, the lower would be the harmonic mean. Like for example, we got 48. When you take 60 and 40, we could have got 50 if the both would be 50-50. The harmonic mean would be 50, but it becomes 60-40. The harmonic mean would be 48. If it is 30-70, it would be further low. 20-80, it would be further low. So they basically used this method of harmonic mean to account for the difference in achievement in male and female. But what they forgot is something which is called, so basically they use something called weighted harmonic mean. Weighted means the population proportion of male and the population proportion of female will act as weights. Okay, like we do a weighted arithmetic mean, W1, if you want to take the score, final score, you say W1 S1 plus W2 S2 divided by W1 plus W2. I mean, that's how you do a typical arithmetic mean. W's are the weights, and basically the weights you give to each of the score 1 and 2, and W1 S1 plus W2 S2 divided by W1 plus W2. That is what is the weighted arithmetic mean. Similarly, they used population proportion as the weights. So what population proportion male are in the society, what population proportion female are in the society, these population proportion gets multiplied to the to the achievements or the attainments, whatever attainment, that score, and then basically they found the average score. But while doing that, they actually kind of overlooked one thing. The thing is, if the population proportion changes, like for example, if you think, suppose female has a low literacy, male has high literacy. Now suppose what happened, accidentally, suppose something happened and your entire female population vanished from the society. And since population proportion was given as the weight to this formulation, so what was happening was, obviously so that is what I have drawn that graph here on the left. If your male population proportion will become 1 and female will become 0, your weighted harmonic mean will maximize. So that means a gender sensitive, like you imagine, I mean, that was the kind of situation this indicator was resulting in, where the United Kingdom, which has reasonably a equal proportion of male and female, used to get a rank lower than United Arab Emirates, which has the dubious distinction of having the most skewed sex ratio in the world, having more than 2 male for female, actually getting a higher rank because the male proportion was higher and that was getting multiplied with the male score. And therefore, since higher weight was multiplied with a higher score, and therefore the resulting value was much more. So obviously the question was, how can a gender-based development measure be designed to capture the difference between life expectancy of male and female? I mean, if you look at the health dimension for that matter, without taking into account of the life itself. I mean, one gender going extinct is actually, if the weaker gender goes extinct, the overall indicator actually improves. That was the gender adjusted development indicator, was coined by Professor Sudhir Anand and Professor Sen. So this actually, this was one of my PhD chapter work, where we sort of spotted this, anomaly and tried to have a sex ratio correction factor. And that actually, when introduced, obviously, I mean, as you could see, I'm just giving a table from that paper, that United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and Saudi Arabia, these 6, the Gulf countries, have the most skewed sex ratio in the world. I mean, as you could see, the sex ratio male by female on the 3rd column, which is highlighted, or the 4th column rather, is something which is showing the sex ratio, which is much higher. I mean, so abysmally, female population proportion is actually much lower, as you could see. But the kind of rank they were getting, so without the penalty, so out of suppose whatever 170 odd countries they might have ranked. So if we don't have this sex ratio correction factor, which we introduced, and we basically found without that, actually the kind of rank they were getting was quite high. Okay, and that was happening because of the anomaly in the measurement. And once we introduced that sex ratio correction factor, obviously the rank failed. I mean, the sex ratio correction factor was nothing, rocket science. It basically, we introduced a factor of, the ratio of population proportion of the gender where you have less than 50% divided by what should be the ideal proportion. Suppose 50% is, we assume that suppose 50% is the ideal proportion, then suppose a country which has, like for example, in case of India, if that India has 940 as the sex ratio, so 940 divided by 1000 would be the sex ratio correction factor for us. Suppose you imagine that for 1000 males, that should have been 1000 females, but instead of 1000 females, you have 940 as female in the population. So you basically whatever score you are getting, you multiply that with 0.94. So that would basically the sex ratio correction factor which we introduced. Of course, why that was the correction factor, that is of course a lot of proof and other kinds of things as there, and some of you are interested, or you can just look for the paper, Gender Development Measure Correcting for the Missing Woman. That is the title of the paper. So you can look at, otherwise if you write to me, I will send the paper. So the idea is that just that it has been done by the who's who of the field, that it would be all right. It is not actually the case. In fact, in 2008, we wrote the working paper, and then by 2010, UNDP actually has abandoned this method. Okay, so if you say in terms of the impact, obviously, even if how much citations the paper got or what kind of other kind of recognition the paper got is actually of secondary nature. The one measure which was persisting in the global front, which was not recognizing the life of a weaker gender, is something which was happening for the last 15 years, and which the UNDP abandoned that method, is something which one can consider as an impact in terms of that. So, and that happened, I mean, if you ask me, that happened because it's something which, when we are reading scholars, we have to have that people can commit mistake, and there can be some misrepresentation, misconception at places. And that's something, as researcher, as we said in the beginning, what is the purpose of the research? I mean, if I go back to that slide, I mean, where we said that purpose is basically, the second one. So research as a never-ending conversation by basically helping us to, go out of ignorance, prejudices, and half-baked ideas. It's something which we are trying to attempt it. And this is something as a researcher's responsibility is to look for such anomalies and try to contribute in terms of better making the situation better, right? Yeah, so this is all about what. I mean, now let's come to the how part. How do we do our research so that it becomes impactful? I mean, I'm just coming from Delhi, and where we actually evaluated hundreds of research proposals submitted to one of our nodal agencies, and one of the things which is very fresh in mind, because we evaluated it just last the entire week was we're doing that, is that on the literature review and impactful writing. I mean, this is the two things which are kind of lacunae, which we normally see. I'm not saying all of us do that, but then there is something which is very prevalent, which we found. First of all, I mean, I made this point at the beginning also. So literature review is not summary of literature. I mean, many of us actually, when we have when we write our literature review, we basically, write in this format, X and, YG say so, ABC said so, and they did that particular work in this particular geographical region, and they got this result. But that is not the way literature review is done. Paragraph after paragraph, they would write about the existing literature in this fashion. So this is, I'm quoting from an article by Knopf, Doing Literature Review 2006 article. So when we write a literature review, do not simply summarize. It is not what I am saying. This has already been sort of mentioned by people in the field, that item by item, each publication you have read, a literature review. Because if you go by that, if you go by this way, over time there are more and more literature. So how many such literature you are going to quote? Hundreds of them. I mean, will that be enough? But there will be still hundreds of them you will be missing out. I mean, that is not the way, that is what we are typically finding in the literature review is being done, or literature review as being taught also to people, is something which we must avoid. And so literature review is more about logically arguing of the point which you are finally the research question which you are arriving at. That research question, from the problem statement to the research question, must be a logical flow, and there the literature must help us in arriving at that research question. In the sense, we do the literature review, we find the literature gap, and we basically find the research question from that. So that is something which is not happening. So there may be thousands or maybe several thousands of papers coming from various institutes, or even if we take the whole country, there may be, I think, millions of papers might be coming. But the idea is that most of these papers are not of the standard quality. So it is we need not actually, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of the UGC sort of recognized institutes have this UGC care journals, but I was going through many such journals while reviewing these proposals to see the quality of paper. I mean, almost all of them, I mean, I don't know, almost all of them, it's or the very large majority of them actually do not have any standard. So, and that is something which is actually, if you talk about making our research count and making our research impactful, and how do we measure? Obviously, I'm not going to measure how many UGC care or Scopus indexed journal paper which one has. I mean, that would be a mere quantitative measure. I mean, that is the basic minimum. I mean, like for example, one of my mathematics friends would say, I mean, if you meet a person, if you say that person is just digit 1, it is as good as explaining the person, just 1 unit. But the person is much more, compared to that digit 1. I mean, when you're saying I have so many such papers, we are basically giving a very, very, basic or a foundational number to that activity. And that number is very, very minimal information. So what is important is what lies within the paper, or what is that we contributed in the paper, and what is that original or what is that new, which I have been saying from the beginning that we attempted. So that is something which we as researcher must be very clear from the beginning, that we are in the attempt of finding something new. I'm not actually doing a lab experiment. I'm not doing similarly. I'm not just taking some data and making analysis. It's almost like, you know, the lab experiment which we did in the college days. So our chemistry lab, what we did in our college days, are not research. Okay, these experiments we did almost every alternate day are something we just to know how a method works. And for that, one can take a data and do that, but that is actually not research. So even if we are doing our literature review, we need to be careful about that we actually make a review, not just summarize. And to know what is a review, of course, is something what, you know, there are fantastic review papers. I mean, I work in the energy domain. You know, Energy Research and Social Science is a journal which came out in, I think, in 2016 or so. Benjamin Sovacool wrote a extremely useful review paper as the first article of that journal. I mean, some of you are interested, you can look at it. You know, that journal is Energy Research and Social Science, Elsevier journal. The first article of that first edition of the journal, Benjamin Sovacool wrote an extremely useful, did an extremely useful review. And that actually came in the category of original article, because review also has to be original. Please remember this. Review also has to be original. Okay, so review cannot be just a summarization of things. So review, while reading one's review, one must also feel that I have learned something new. This is some new information which has come to the knowledge, domain of knowledge. So therefore that, or for example, there is a 1995 Zheng's paper on aggregated poverty measure. I mean, that's an excellent review on all the poverty measures. So again, I mean, so review, I mean, is something which is, therefore, one can actually improve the quality of research and impact of the research by, doing a proper review, not by just summarizing. We are not only wasting our time, we are also wasting others' time. Right. The other point which I would like to mention here, because the talk was on the impact. Sometimes this we encounter in the literature review, that if you are not going to the original source of data, we might create wrong impact. I mean, a classic example, this is actually Kuznets' inverted U hypothesis. So, I mean, some of us definitely know about this, that Kuznets' inverted U hypothesis, which is basically a relationship between development and inequality. And the relationship is such that the inequality would be low at the lower stage of development, then the inequality will rise, but as the development further increases, the inequality would fall. Right? All of you agree to this? I mean, this is something. Yeah. So this is what is the Kuznets inverted U hypothesis on the screen. And if you see, this Kuznets hypothesis actually resulted into something that, that resulted into that the economic forces, I mean, because the inequality would rise initially, maybe with the accumulation of wealth with few individuals, or the society, the society becomes from the agricultural society to industrial society, that inequality would rise. I mean, that's what the economic forces. I mean, it was also but believed that because with further development, the inequality would fall, it was believed that the same economic forces will take care of the inequality later. I mean, as on the slide you can read, the economic forces that tended to increase the inequality in a market economy, the same economic forces, even in the absence of political government and interventions such as taxes and transfers, the same economic forces would offset the trend later. I mean, that is what is understood from the, Kuznets inverted U hypothesis, that inequality would rise first, but then subsequently the inequality would fall. What it resulted in? So this idea basically resulted in that the free market, I mean, those who are advocating against free market, they fell flat, because free market will deliver not only prosperity, but also equity in the long run. And this will actually not result into polarization, what Marx sort of predicted. And this came out as a counter, an ideological counter to the opponents of capitalism and greater government intervention. So this is what Kuznets hypothesis sort of contributed. But there is a catch here, and of course, Kuznets hypothesis was later tested by others, and one of the greatest critic of it is Thomas Piketty. Some of you may know him. He's an economist. So what basically the critic is the following, that what basically, if you see on the right of this the slide, there is a graph which is talking about the inequality in US, for example. And as you could see, you can see an inverted U at the beginning, but then it is again the inequality is on the rise. So therefore, that basically Piketty, when he looked at the recent data, he basically concluded that Kuznets mistook the 1930 to 50 decrease in inequality for the endpoints in development. In the sense, the inverted U that actually happened, you can see in 1950s. So that is what is the end point of development. Inequality has again reached to the pre-World War II level, and similar trends are visible in Europe and other parts of the world also. So it is not an inverted U, it is basically becoming like an N. So that's what basically Piketty sort of postulated. Now, and basically the critic, not only Piketty, there are other researchers also critic Kuznets, saying that Kuznets was wrong when he said about this inverted U, and this is not holding true. The inequality is again rising. But nobody actually bothered to see what exactly Kuznets said. Nobody in the sense, those who critiqued Kuznets, left, right, and center, probably missed out on what Kuznets said in his original paper. This original paper is available, in the internet days, everything is available in our tips of our finger. So this original paper was available. And even when I also personally read Kuznets' inverted U hypothesis, I didn't also bother to see what actually Kuznets told in the original paper. Till the time, I listened to this point in one of the conferences where a JNU professor mentioned about this particular point. And then I went back and saw, in fact, Kuznets actually, in the 50s, 1950s, when Kuznets wrote this paper, there was a paucity of data. In fact, he didn't have any country's time series data to basically showcase what happens to inequality when the country was from a less developed situation to a middle income country to a highly developed situation. He didn't have for time series data for any country. So what he rather had was the inequality of the middle income countries. So basically he took a cross-sectional data of various countries at different economic level and showed the inequality of those countries, and basically hypothesized that when a country probably moves from low income to middle income to high income, since low income and high income countries are low inequalities and middle income countries have higher inequalities, he basically said probably it will have a inverted U curve, that the inequality would rise and then it would fall. But he was also conscious of the fact that the time period in which this data was available, those time period were the Great Recession days, as well as the world has fought 2 world wars. So he was also basically, very, very aware about this situation. In fact, quoting Kuznets, I should have put double quotes here because this is directly from the paper, the first paragraph of the conclusion, that in concluding this paper, I am acutely conscious of the meagerness of reliable information presented. The paper is perhaps 5% empirical information and 95% speculation, and some of it possibly tainted by wishful thinking that the society would take care of the inequality as it becomes more and more affluent. So that is what Kuznets himself wrote in his paper. And it was Vogel who is Kuznets' student, and both Kuznets and Vogel are Nobel laureates. Vogel also mentions that, in one of his writings with a lot of sadness, that Kuznets repeatedly warned about the fragility of data, a little more than pure guesswork. He also stressed that even if the data turned out to be valid, they pertain to an extremely limited period of time and to exceptional historical experiences. But such warnings are ignored, and the Kuznets curve was raised to the level of law by other economists. So what I like to say here is that the way we do literature review, we sometimes are lazy to not to go to the original source. If you are referring to any theory, I think it is always a good idea to go to the original source and cross check it. I mean, that is how, otherwise the impact can be the other way around. This is an example where actually Kuznets curve's impact, in favoring capitalism was something which actually Kuznets himself didn't want. I mean, or his data actually doesn't show, but the impact went in the other way. What he actually, completely different from what he actually wanted to say. So this is something which is important. I thought I would just, and the last point which I would like to mention about is impactful writing. I mean, this is also something which, I mean, almost 70 to 80% of the proposals which we recently saw has been generated from AI generated text. I mean, this is something which is extreme. So for impactful research, if you want to do impactful research, originality is extremely important. So original writing cannot be compromised with. And not only that, original writing have a sense of joy also. When we write, irrespective of the fact that we write not in the best of the language, there may be a lot of mistakes, but there is a joy in committing those mistakes, overcoming those challenges, and finally producing a publishable manuscript. So if you want to do an impactful research, I do believe auto-generated or any kind of generated text is not going to help us far. Okay, you again might have a lot of quantity, but then, the quality would be compromised somewhere, and obviously your originality, creativity would be compromised. And we feel that each one of us have their own style of writing. We lose the style also in the process. We all will tend to write in the same way. I mean, whether it is about even fiction or story writing or about scientific writing. I mean, while even without looking at the author's name, sometimes we recognize by reading the paragraphs, who has written this, because this is about that originality or their own style of writing. I mean, you can recognize a Rabindranath Tagore, even if you have not read, the name on the top. I mean, you can recognize a Ruskin Bond, you can recognize a Mulk Razanand easily, Premchand also. Okay. So, but then you can also recognize if you read Sen's writing, Amartya Sen's writing, without even you have looked at who is the author. Suppose you're reading from the middle, you would probably recognize it has been written by Sen. So that is what is, impactful research or impactful researcher requires a little bit of time. I mean, that is something which one should not. I mean, that doesn't matter. I mean, there are grammars can be checked and those things can be corrected, but not the way you are arguing. That sequence of argument and the way you are narrating or you are explaining or you are interpreting is something which should be left to you. I mean, that is what, I mean, I would just like to give one of the things which from my own experience of writing, I generally follow this rule. I thought I would share with all of you that I call myself as the LLF rule, which is basically, we keep revising, obviously. I mean, I myself also is from vernacular medium. I mean, English, not my, the first language in my school. So, so that is something which all of us learn as we go along. So it is not that my writing, I mean, some of us might be very fortunate, have a very good articulation skill and would be able to produce what they wanted to articulate in the first go. But some of us who are not so fortunate, would put in that extra effort of just revising 3-4 times, showing to our friends, reading it out for ourselves or others, and that actually will improve our language. The idea is the language need to be simple and communicated effectively. So that is the, we basically learn it by practice. The other thing is that when we read articles, I mean, of others, while you are reviewing, one of the things we notice is that, one sentence and the next sentence doesn't have continuity. It is actually difficult to have discontinuity, I believe. it is always easy to have continuity. Whatever you have written first sentence, the next sentence you can, I mean, that's what they say in good writing, that by reading any random sentence from the write-up, I should be able to guess what was the previous sentence and what is going to be the next sentence. And that's, if somebody is able to guess, that means we have written to even have the similar expectation flow of a reader. I mean, that is how the article or the story or fiction or non-fiction writing becomes a page turner, because people will love to then read, and finish your article. So that is possible when we have that, yeah. So have that, sorry, I wanted to make, sorry. So that is the last point. So have that flow. So I wanted to say about this, sorry, I told the third point as the second. So that connection between sentences has to be there. So that is, and whenever there is a break, obviously we have different paragraphs. So paragraph to paragraph, there is a thought break. I mean, a reader would also expect something new is coming in this paragraph, or something extra new is coming in this section. So section breaks, subsection breaks, paragraph breaks are for those coming to these new points. But within a paragraph, and between also paragraph, point to point also, how we are moving is something which the connectivity or the flow which one has to check. And the second point on this slide is the logic. See, as researcher, we don't have the luxury of writing anything and then probably, suppose even if I am to say, I was mentioning about suppose the gender equity. Suppose I will say India is a gender unequal society. I cannot just say that. Or I would say India is largely a gender equal society. Both the sentences I cannot say, because I have to tell that with evidence. So that is the reason the evidence can be not always data. The evidence can be other research reports as well. Thank you. Other research report as well, which which have that authority. So I will have to probably, if I'm writing about something relating to the gender, I will probably either quote any policy paper, or basically quote any data, or quote any like for example some like for example the quote from the book which has been on the gender chapter of the book Participation and Development by Jan Dries and Amartya Sen. I mean, what I'm trying to say is I have to write with evidence. Without evidence, I probably cannot write. Even the humans are mortal. I mean, if I'm writing that sentence, a reader would expect that the next sentence would be, what is the average life expectancy? I mean, or I would write, though human life expectancy is on the rise, but still the life expectancy is close to 80 years. Average life expectancy is like this or that. That's what I have to mention. So these, I mean, that is how we develop our writing in a research, and to make it impactful is something we do that. So this is my last slide. So this is the point I was trying to make, that obviously, so how do you measure it? So your measurement, I mean, I know conventionally universities, institutes measure reward on the basis of various parameters, but that is, I mean, that as a researcher, if you ask yourselves, is something which I think that those are there, but those are very mechanical. I mean, at the end of the day, it is not about publishing in a very high impact journal which nobody reads. Okay, it is better to probably have that article. I mean, I myself have become victim of that. I mean, I used to have in some of the articles in the EPW, and I used to find a very good readers base. And subsequently, I became greedy, and I wanted to have one of my energy articles, or few of my energy articles published in, high impact. But then maybe one or some places I succeeded, some places I failed in publishing those. But I found that had I actually done it in EPW, I would have done more justice to my work, more justice to the research itself, in terms of whom I interacted, more justice to the society, and it would have a larger impact in terms of it. Though it is, whether EPW comes in ABDC or it doesn't come, it has fallen its SGR score. It doesn't. I mean, suppose as a researcher, that certain journal is actually a mouthpiece of a particular subject. Irrespective of, I think it is always a good idea to have your article there, and if you want to really become an impactful researcher. I mean, I think you need to go beyond those conventional. I mean, it is very, I mean, it is easier to say that do. I also agree to that. It is very tempting to basically, get attracted by those benefits, but then I don't think this will take us far. Okay, so only targeting high impact journal is not something, or not by publishing more papers compromising quality. Nowadays, even the entire market force is there. One should not get victimized by that. There are a lot of paid routes. Sometimes we get a lot of, for instance, I got one opportunity like in the DIBR case. We guest edited it, but there was no nothing. There was no financial benefit, nothing. But that was a much greater kind of satisfaction I had compared to, for example, any other similar satisfaction I would have got. Like, there was one case, one offer was there to guest edit another special issue for another journal, where the idea was that if you do that, you basically, that special issue comes as a book also, and then you get your article freely published in that particular journal, because that journal actually asks for payment for any article. That's a very reputed journal. It's a open access paid journal, and that means, so that actually, as a matter of fact, I had to decline that offer by saying that I never publish in such journals, and I never can persuade anybody to, as an editor, to publish in that journal. So the idea is that is something which we as researchers have to make a choice, so that whether we are going by which route. And people have also, we have witnessed at various places, people are making cartel and exploiting the system, making a group of 3, 4, 5 researchers and together publishing, where their contribution to that article. So this is something which actually we are getting driven by this publishing more and more papers, and that is what something is not going to be impactful. So that is what, see, if you want to see, if you ask probably, the same question I was asked, in this talk, was that how do you measure and evaluate research impact? Somebody will say, what is your whatever citation score, what rank you have got in such and such. Yeah, I mean, I think that is not actually, if you, as I said, I mean, that gender paper which we wrote in 2008, that was just a working paper. But then I'm not saying that paper only, but such critics to gender development measures have resulted UNDP to actually improvise the measure and abandon the earlier measure. I think that nowhere that gets documented, nowhere, no quantity measure of that would be ever available to us. Right. But then, but as a researcher, I think we have to be also, I mean, as every person, as a researcher, every, if we have, our demand also should be towards that, a substantial impact rather than this impact in these conventional measures. Yeah. So that's what the point I just want to like to say in the end, that, doing genuine research, attempting new and following the scientific method, and it is not to be satisfying anybody, not to any editor of any journal, to satisfy ourselves that, well, I have done something new, I have followed a scientific method, and I have contributed to the domain of knowledge. And that is what and obviously, and the choice of domain, I'm the very first thing what I said, what I'm doing research and how I am doing research. So the choice I'm making in terms of what to research on, it is not about, I'm not targeting this special issue, that special issue, this journal, that journal. I'm trying to target an important problem, a problem which is crying for attention, which is unattended. It is not a crowded space. It is, a path which has not been taken by many. I'm taking that path. I'm trying an honest attempt, to a genuine attempt in terms of following the scientific method, and in the attempt of finding new and contributing and impacting, lives. So and contributing to the knowledge domain. So that's, I think, would be the, research impact in short. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, Dr. Hippu, thank you so much. I will open now the question answer session for the house. If anybody has any questions, you may please feel free to put to Dr. Hippu. Dr. Hippu, I would request you to stay put for another 5-10 minutes.
Sure. We can go
Yes.
up to whenever the question Q&A over. That's okay. Yeah.
Yes. So participants can unmute their microphones. They can also type their questions in the chat box, and we can read them out, read the questions out for you to Dr. Hippu. We have the next 5 minutes for the question answer session, please.
Yeah. So no questions is no question is bad.
Yes.
Only
So
answers
what I
can be.
will, yes, I will just put your email ID in the group.
Yeah.
So in case any of the participants have any questions post the session, they may please contact you, and I would request you to, address their
Yeah,
questions.
I am able to access the chat. If it is fine, I can type in my ID. I just typed it.
If you can please do that right away, sir, for all the participants.
Yeah, I did it.
Oh,
I
yes,
think
I
it
can
is.
see that. Yes. So for all the participants, Dr. Hippu's email ID is there in the chat box. We will just try to copy and paste it in the main group also so that it is there forever after the chat ends as well. Thank you, Dr. Hippu, for your time. Dr. Roy wanted to be here, but he entered another meeting. He wanted to
Sure.
personally thank you for your time and effort and the
Sure.
preparation that we saw in the PPT you had gone through. Thank you so much, Dr. Hippu. We expect you to be here for the conference as well, sir.
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you
I'll
so
be.
much, Dr. Hippu. Thank you.
So thank you all of you, and so I'm sorry for the technical glitch in the beginning. Yeah, but I hope we will interact more as we go along. Okay, you can definitely. I'll also send my phone number here, so that you if you want to drop in a message in the WhatsApp also 8907. Yeah. So
Thank
that's
you.
my
Thank you so much.
that's my WhatsApp number. So you can drop in a message if you have any queries.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hippu. It was an
And
honor
all
having
of
you
you
with us
also,
today, and we really learned a lot.
Yeah. Most of you are, I mean, all of you are, welcome to IRMA. If you are coming to Ahmedabad, Barodara, or that side of Gujarat, or I know, please and definitely visit IRMA. So you have half a day to at least spend at IRMA and in and around. So it is one of the institutes which is a legacy institute. Dr. Verghese Kurian founded the institute, and we are situated at Anand, and Anand is a place all of us are familiar but may not know. See, all of us are familiar with Amul. So Amul's full form is Anand Milk Union Limited.
Yes.
So that's where the place is, and that is also is the place where the white revolution originated. So most welcome to our institute whenever you are in that side. Yeah, if anything you know also any help from IRMA, you are most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for the invite. We'll definitely try to visit you someday. It's been an honor. Thank you so much, sir.
Sure.
For the
Thank
rest
you.
of
Thank
the
you, Dr. Anjali.
participants,
Yeah.
yes. For the participants, we meet tomorrow again at 10:30 a.m. You may please join the meeting using the same link. And at 10:30, we have a session by Professor Rajasara. So he'll be unlocking a few other, mysteries of research for you. So let's meet again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Bye. Take care. Can I request the participants who are still with us to switch their cameras on so that we can have a group photo, please? Yeah, thank you so much. Can I